Tonight on PrimeTime, Ukraine's Anti-Corruption Bureau has launched a sweeping probe into alleged kickbacks in the energy sector. Senior officials at state nuclear operator Energoatom are under investigation. President Volodymyr Zelensky and his energy minister are calling for full transparency. As Kyiv fights a war on its borders, another battle rages within its institutions. Good evening. The investigation centres on multi-million-dollar energy contracts and allegations of inflated pricing, reportedly involving top executives. For Zelensky's administration, this is a crucial test of credibility, balancing international confidence with domestic reform. Let's take a look at this package.
Ukraine's Anti-Corruption Bureau says it has uncovered what it calls a high-level criminal organization operating inside the country's energy and defense sectors. Senior Detective Alexander Abakumov said investigators had gathered substantial evidence.
As a result of the work carried out, thousands of hours of audio recordings were obtained, which are evidence of the activities of a high-level criminal organization operating in the energy and defense sectors. Among the currently identified members of the criminal organization are a former advisor to the Minister of Energy, the Executive Director for Physical Protection and Security of the joint stock company Energoatom, a well-known businessman, and 4 individuals working in back offices.
He said the group's main goal was to profit illegally from contracts with Ukraine's state-run nuclear operator.
The main task of the criminal organization was to obtain illegal benefits from contractors of Energoatom.
Construction continues at the Khmelnytsky nuclear power plant, one of several facilities managed by Energoatom, which supplies most of Ukraine's electricity. In Kyiv, Energy Minister Svitlana Hrinchuk said the investigation must be conducted openly and fairly.
I hope that the objectivity and openness of the investigation will not affect, but will only reassure our international partners that we are open to any actions that are taking place.
President Volodymyr Zelensky also addressed the issue, calling the case a crucial test of Ukraine's fight against corruption during wartime.
Any effective action against corruption is very necessary. The inevitability of punishment is necessary. Energoatom provides Ukraine with the largest share of energy generation now. Cleanliness in the company is a priority. In energy, in every industry, everyone who built the schemes must receive a clear procedural answer. There must be sentences.
Zelensky urged government officials and law enforcement agencies to work closely with anti-corruption investigators to ensure accountability. The $100 million scandal has increased pressure on Kyiv to show progress in tackling corruption, a key condition for joining the European Union and securing ongoing international support.
Well, joining me now to discuss this and a couple of other pressing topics is my special guest, Mr. John Kavalik, Senior Editor at Issue Insight. John, good to have you with us again in the studio. Given President Zelensky's anti-corruption commitment, how damaging is this for him politically?
It's ugly. Now, but it has two sides, and the two sides are, I remember a couple of years ago, the finance minister, Mr. Marchenko, he gave a statement. He said, I wish people would stop talking about this myth of corruption in Ukraine. And I about fell over, as did everyone else in the room that heard him. But they need to show that they're dealing with corruption. But they also need to show there is corruption, because denial isn't a good pathway toward European Union membership, nor is it a good pathway toward continuing support by all the countries of the willing in that. So this is something, too, that several months ago, President Zelensky himself and his team, Andrei Yermak, who's head of his office, had tried to weaken the same institutions that are now involved in these investigations. So, you know, this isn't a clean debate in terms of there is corruption, we have to get rid of it. There's also systemic, endemic corruption is in the DNA of Ukrainian business people. And that's not a criticism, it's just look where they came from, the USSR, where it was as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting, particularly the perspective from the West onto this issue. I mean, do you think the investigation could erode trust on the part of big Western supporters?
Well, it will, because it reinforces the narrative that everyone already has. There is corruption. There was corruption before Russia invaded in 2014. There's corruption between 14 and 22, and there's been corruption since. And profiteering and corruption during war is not unique to Ukraine. We see it in a lot of countries because piles, in this case, hundreds of billions of dollars pour into a country very quickly, and the goal is save the country. So if someone's charging a little more, if someone's doing something little, but they said, hey, I can get it to you, a lot of times you're going to put that aside and say, all right, later we'll prosecute what's right and wrong, but right now we have to save lives, right now we have to save our country. And that's the worst part of this, because some of these inflated prices, not just for energy, but it's military equipment, it's food going into the distribution systems. Some of it you can sort of try to excuse, but the problem is when the government denies that it's there, then tries to weaken institutions designed to root it out and prosecute it. And then you're saying, well, we want to be members of the EU and the European Union. One of their recent reports said Ukraine has to still focus on corruption. And Zelensky's saying, I get that, but I'm also trying to save my country.
Yeah, an awful lot of pressure on him. I mean, the president is such a prominent figure that I think perhaps many people will be much less aware with other leaders in the country, business leaders, officials from energy companies. I mean, what is going on at the moment in terms of the internal power dynamics? Should we read anything into the timing of this investigation?
Yes, in that this is not long after the president's office, and they are under martial law. So everything starts with President Zelensky's office and works its way down. And his party can still controls the Rada, the parliament. And so it's not lost on anybody that what is taking place is soon after his office did just about everything possible to weaken the tools that the parliament could use and that the public sector could use and the private sector could use. Private sector understands that this is the way people do business, but there's a visceral reaction when it is in wartime, when you know that the president's office controls all the decisions, and some of the people that are involved are his former business partner, are friends of his, are friends of his chief of staff. I mean, everybody's connected, and some of these people have left. Some of them are in Russia, some of them are in Europe, some are in the UK. So he's personalized the war, and maybe that's unfair. Everyone has personalized him as personalizing the war. I mean, he is Ukraine, Ukraine is Zelensky. And unfortunately, when something goes bad, everyone's going to focus on him. And unfortunately, a lot of these roads lead to him, and they lead to people right around him.
And you mentioned Russia there, John. What about Russia? How might they look to exploit this situation?
Oh, they love this. I mean, but in this, what's so interesting is spending time in both countries, that the Russian information machine will seize on anything that is potentially looking bad for Ukraine, and they're going to exploit it. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, are doing the same thing the Russians. So they're not mismatched. Ukraine has really stepped up its ability to message. I remember immediately after the war, in sort of the first 3-4 months in 2022, the government took control of all the channels in Ukraine, and it was all about patriotism. You would turn on the television and you would see these incredible videos with orchestra music, and they would be showing the heroics of the Ukrainian fighters, having dispatched Russia from Bucha and that. It was right out of like World War II and the Germany, with some of those just incredible images to get people psyched. And you saw in Russia in World War II. So it's really been an information battle, and they both will exploit it.
A very difficult situation. Nevertheless, if this is managed well, do you think it's possible that this could be turned into a positive for the country? You spoke earlier about the not admitting to any problems at all was unrealistic, lacked credibility. Well, if there's a softening on that, if there's more regulation, more transparency, being seen to be tough where there is corruption, could that be a sign of a country, a system that's maturing?
Absolutely. And again, the challenge here is that there's the positive, which is you've acknowledged it, you have institutions in place to challenge it, you have a judicial system in place to prosecute it. But if you're a company looking at Ukraine right now, you're going, I knew it. They were corrupt before the war, they're corrupt now, and now they're corrupt during a war. What do you think they're going to do when $300 billion comes flowing into the country to reconstruct Ukraine? So it's one of those, we're happy that the process is happening, but unfortunately, the short-term outcome is just mixed. It's not really good, it's not really bad, it's just sort of has both an important moment, but also it raises questions for companies and for governments putting money in, saying, if these people are going to do this when we're giving them hundreds of billions a year, what are they going to do to our companies when the companies are investing hundreds of billions of dollars a year?
Indeed, plenty more to run on this story. We'll just leave it there on that story for now. John, thank you very much indeed. Okay, it is a somber night for Turkey's armed forces. A Turkish military C-130 transport aircraft has crashed near the Azerbaijan-Georgia border while returning to Turkey. Authorities in Georgia confirmed the plane disappeared from radar shortly after entering its airspace. Joint rescue operations involving Turkey, Georgia and Azerbaijan are underway, while investigations continue to determine the cause of the crash that killed all on board.
A Turkish military C-130 cargo plane has crashed near the Azerbaijan-Georgia border, Turkish authorities say. The aircraft with 20 personnel on board had taken off from Azerbaijan heading back to Turkey. Video footage reportedly shows the plane spiraling as it descended, leaving a trail of white smoke. The Georgian Interior Ministry confirmed the crash occurred in the Signagi municipality, around 5 kilometers from the border. According to the Georgian Air Navigation Service, a few minutes after entering Georgian airspace, the Turkish C-130 aircraft disappeared from radar without sending a distress signal. Search and rescue operations are underway in coordination with Azerbaijani and Georgian authorities. Turkey's Interior Minister Ali Yerlikaya said he spoke by phone with Georgia's Interior Minister Gela Geladze. An investigation is underway under Georgia's criminal code covering aviation safety violations resulting in loss of life. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has expressed deep sorrow at the incident.
Today, we learnt with deep sorrow that our C-130 military aircraft, which was on its way to our country from Azerbaijan, crashed on the Georgia-Azerbaijan border. Our efforts to reach the wreckage are continuing in coordination with the local authorities. God willing, we will overcome this accident with the least possible loss. May our Lord have mercy on our martyrs. Let us, with our prayers, be by their side, God willing.
Koordineli biçimde çalışmalarımız devam ediyor.
Azerbaijan also expressed condolences, sharing in Turkey's grief. In a message to President Erdogan, Azerbaijan extended heartfelt sympathies to the families of the deceased, the people of Turkey, and the Turkish government. Prime Minister Ali Asadov, in a conversation with his Georgian counterpart, affirmed that Azerbaijan is ready to provide all necessary assistance, including dispatching search and rescue teams and relevant personnel from the Ministry of Emergency Situations to the site.
Okay, let's discuss this tragic story now with John Kavlik, who is with us in the studio. John, first impressions, what stands out to you about how Turkey, Georgia, Azerbaijan have begun to handle this incident, especially the speed of the reaction?
It demonstrates there are adults in the room. You have, of course, President Erdogan, whose military controlled that aircraft. President of Azerbaijan stepping in immediately, the Prime Minister and President of Georgia as well. So it's demonstrating that containment, the political word, but containment's really important, dialogue, communication. And I think that all three heads of state and heads of government want to make certain that what previous issues, bilaterally, trilaterally, and then also adding the Russian Federation into this as well, that they share information quickly, that they're transparent. And the good news too is the United States has ears and eyes everywhere. So the US intelligence community, US Department of Defense / War will also be able to provide important data points. So, you know, as I said, it's great that they're communicating quickly, but unfortunately, the subtext to all of this is what happened between Turkey and Russia with the downing of the military aircraft to the Syrian border, Azerbaijan with the commercial aircraft with Russia, the fact that Abkhazia and Ossetia and Georgia are controlled by the Russian Federation. So unfortunately, you know, when you hear a tragedy like this, you can't help but just immediately replay those historical moments that are connected with at least two of these countries.
And let's just focus a bit more on Turkey, as you say. I mean, given the location of the incident, how significant now is this for Turkey's regional partnership?
It's important. President Erdogan, he can't afford domestically to be seen as anything other than strong. And he's going to demand accountability. The challenge is going to be if it's not simply an accident. When a C-130 is like the Volvo of military aircraft, it lands, it's used by 100+ countries. It lands in all sorts of weather and takeoff. It's easy to service, it's easy to fly. So, hopefully it's a mechanical error, or mechanical problem. But if it's not, President Erdogan is going to have an incredible challenge, because the challenge will be, if there's a third party involved, whether it's a state or non-state actor, how does he respond? The US is going to be asking him to be measured, and 20 people dying, it's going to be hard to be measured. He's going to need to show a lot of strength. And that's where President of Azerbaijan comes in, who's quick, who has dealt with a situation like this too recently for the citizens of Azerbaijan. So he's dealt with Russia on this issue, and I'm not saying Russia's involved, but he's an actor who has respect in the region, particularly in Georgia as well. So I'm going to expect that this will be Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, Russia, Georgia, trying pretty quickly to make clear what happened and what didn't happen.
Very interesting indeed. Obviously a tragic story, and one that no doubt will develop over the coming days. Thank you very much for your analysis, John. Okay, we're going to take a short break now, but do stay with us. We'll be back in just a few moments' time.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent.
Challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories.
Welcome to Gabala. One important note.
To fears.
I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are reporting on the shade of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, for A News.
Welcome back to Primetime. Venezuela's president is drawing a line tonight, saying his country will defend its sovereignty as tensions rise with Washington. Now, his warning follows US airstrikes in nearby waters and growing talk in Washington of possible military action against Caracas. Let's take a look.
President of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, says his country will not give in to pressure from the United States. Speaking at a ruling party event in Caracas, he said Venezuela will defend its peace and independence against any foreign threat.
What the United States Congress discusses, what they will approve or not approve, what do we care what the North American empire says? Neither its president nor its Congress, if in Venezuela and South America we are determined to be free. Let them talk and discuss whatever they want. No one will take away our freedom, our peace and independence of the country.
His remarks followed a US Senate vote that allowed President Donald Trump to continue military operations in the region. The United States has carried out several strikes on vessels in the Caribbean and Pacific, saying they were linked to drug trafficking. But critics, including some lawmakers and foreign officials, have questioned the lack of evidence behind those claims. According to Reuters, Venezuela is now preparing a guerrilla-style defense plan using old Russian-made weapons. The strategy aims to resist or disrupt any US attack, despite the country's limited military capacity. Analysts say Venezuela's forces face shortages of food, equipment, and training, but Maduro insists the military and civilian militias are ready to fight if needed. Washington, meanwhile, denies plans to strike inside Venezuela, but maintains a heavy military presence in the region.
If you're just joining us now, senior editor at Issue Insight, John Kavlik, is with us in the studio. John, this warning from Maduro, how serious is it? Is it just rhetoric, or is the confrontation sort of stepping up somewhat?
It's basically his inner thoughts coming to the fold. You take him seriously because he is the head of state of a sovereign nation. But he's also a head of state that, after Hugo Chavez, who he replaced, and Mr. Maduro in his previous life was a bus driver. Nothing against bus drivers, but he wasn't a career politician, wasn't a career military guy. And he's taken Venezuela into the commercial, economic, and political toilet in terms of where it was and where it is today. It was, 20 years ago, almost every major corporation in the world had a presence in Venezuela, one of the richest countries in the world. And look at it today. So he's doing what he can. Ironically, though, as he's making these statements about President Trump and the United States Congress, Trump administration extended a license for Chevron to continue to operate, and Chevron's pumping out almost a majority of the oil that Venezuela is producing in the world market. So there's always a little more truth than there is to what the politicians may say.
And in terms of these statements, John, defending sovereignty, very strong statement. What does that mean in practical terms, do you think?
Staying in power. For him, it's survival. That's all sovereignty means. What he needs to do is to create uncertainty amongst his population. And President Trump's helping him by, we have military assets in the air, in the sea. The world's largest aircraft carrier, the Gerald Ford, is in Gibraltar, near Gibraltar. It's on its way there. So 500,000 tons worth of military hardware. And President Maduro is saying, they're going to invade, they're going to invade. And because President Trump isn't as articulate as some might want him to be, when he threatens, when he cajoles, when he makes these statements, you don't really know what he means. Does he mean that we're going to land troops in Venezuela and we're going to try to grab Maduro? Or does it mean that we're going to use a missile and we're just going to blow him up where he is and make deals with the head of the military or the military establishment and say, we're going to take him out, we're going to pay you all off, and let's move on.
But your analysis is that the threats, the sense of a common enemy is having somewhat of a unifying effect, helping Maduro.
Because there will always be, when Cuba's a great example of this, when subsequent administrations now for 65 years said that no one supports the Cuban government. Well, for 65 years, the Cuban type of government has stayed there because there isn't an established opposition. In Venezuela, they've had 2 elections, both of which the US and other countries have said Maduro has lost. And in each case, he has said he's won, and the military has backed him. And so we had Juan Guaido for a while under the previous Trump administration. That didn't go anywhere, and he left. We had recent election where sort of 2 candidates, one of whom wasn't the candidate, but sort of the backstop, won the Nobel Peace Prize. He has support, and he has enough support and enough money to, at the moment, buy that support.
So how much further do you think that Washington might go?
Ultimately, it's they kill him. Or they extract him a la Noriega in Panama. He runs to the Vatican embassy. We set up speakers outside, blaring loud music for days, and eventually he goes, no mas, no mas, and give up, and off he is to Miami, where I'm certain if he arrives in shackles in Miami, President Trump will be there to greet him. The other is just kill him. Either we kill him, we give the tools to other people to kill them, or we just say, how much money do you want? He's already got a $50 million bounty on him, which hasn't instilled anybody to do anything yet. Maybe the Trump administration says, $100 million to anybody who takes him out. Now you're getting serious money. The other aspect of this is that Brazil and Colombia, his two neighbors, during the last decade, a lot of Venezuelans have left for Brazil, they've left for Colombia, created havoc there because of the fact that those countries just don't have the infrastructure to have more people in them. A lot of Venezuelans came to the US, the Trump administration is sending them back, and ironically, Maduro is taking them back. Some countries have said, we're not going to accept these flights. He has. And the Trump administration also, we have an envoy, Richard Grenell, who went down there, got some prisoners released. He felt he was making some headway. But Secretary of State Rubio, who is of Cuban descent, so no fan of Cuba, and also because Venezuela supports Cuba, particularly with energy, he's no fan of Maduro. So he's pushed Grenell out off the side, and now they're looking more aggressively. And so for President Maduro, his only option right now is to bring this to outside of his borders. So, hey, he's going after the Americas. It's the Monroe Doctrine again. Now it's the Trump Doctrine, and he wants to control all of us. So Brazil, Lula, I know you don't like me, but you need to help me because I'm one of you. Or being Colombia, and so he's trying that, but no one really likes him, and everyone would really be happy if he was gone, because they figure Venezuela then stabilizes, people come back home. So and it's sort of the same with Turkey and Syria. It's in Turkey's interest for a stable Syria, because then the millions of Syrians that took refuge in Turkey start moving home again. Same thing.
It's interesting. Is there an argument, John, then, that actually to allow the country to stabilise rather than getting into confrontations might lead to more progressive change faster?
And that's been part of the theory with Cuba. You engage, you re-engage, and if the government can deliver for its people, then you may not like the government, but at least it's more stable. With Maduro, you've got a system where, and for him it's sort of optics. He's a big guy, he's got his mustache, wears his flag costumes and that. So he's not a empathetic or a sympathetic political figure as the United States sees him. I'm not talking for other countries, but they sort of see this big 6'5" lumbering guy, and they just say, this man is a buffoon. And so the only way that we can stabilize Venezuela is he's refusing to do it. So we're going to have to figure something else out. And then you add all, with the Trump administration, with the drugs, with the fentanyl exports, and that brings a whole nother avenue to this, where for the Trump administration, they're sort of like, okay, we've tried to work with this guy, and then he'll go back. Bush tried to work with him, Obama tried to work with him, Biden tried to work with him. He's unworkable, so he's left us no alternative. He's not going to behave himself, so therefore we're going to do what we're going to do. The problem is we really don't know what it is we're going to do, and we're not sure how to do it, because our first term, when we tried to get rid of him and support another candidate, didn't go too well.
Nevertheless, at least the position of the US is outspoken and has some clarity to it. Tell us about China and Russia. Where are they at this point in relation to Venezuela?
For Russia, as President Maduro has said, the Venezuelan military has a lot of Russian hardware. Most of it's old, though. I don't know how much of it's operational. Russia has said that it'll continue to provide military hardware to Venezuela for its defensive needs. They've not necessarily gone into offensive needs, but defensive needs. But Russia's not going to be shipping nuclear warheads to Venezuela. One, because they need everything that they've got in Ukraine, and two, just the financial resources required, and also the political capital that would need be invested in someone who isn't likely to bring anything good. You're just basically postponing the inevitable. And for China, Venezuela owes China a tremendous amount of money, because over the last decade, what Maduro has done is basically pre-sold oil, and China has given him money for it. Well, they owe a lot more oil now to China, and China just isn't not too happy with Venezuela from a commercial standpoint. So they're not likely to come to his rescue in any meaningful way. And for the Trump administration, President Trump likes bold and big. It's optics for him. And as we've seen with some of his trade agreements, it's the moment that matters to him. The big Sharpie, I'm holding it up. But in the case of South Korea, we had that. They still don't have a written text of a trade agreement. The European Union is still trying to figure out. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, promised $750 billion worth of investment in the United States. And they're like, we're never going to do that. So now they're trying to create lists to manufacture it. So with President Trump, his team, they sit around and it's, we can do this, Mr. President, we can do that. You know, you'll look tough, you'll look this. He loves all this stuff. That's why we're sending an aircraft carrier, the Gerald R. Ford. That's a lot of metal. That's a lot of hardware we're putting, potentially sitting off the coast. But according to the Defense Department, its rate of speed, basically how fast it's getting to Venezuela, has slowed. So now this is their question, is President Trump maybe reconsidering this? And maybe let the Coast Guard go back in and do drug interdiction, or maybe they've made their moment, they've made their statement, and now he goes home.
Well, that's very interesting you say that, because I was going to ask you, you know, within the Department of War, within the analytical circles inside the White House, is there any sense in which you think there's an acceptance that actually we're not going to be able to get rid of Maduro right now? So possibly we might want to soften or change our strategy.
Absolutely. You know, most of the time, the Department of Defense / War, Southern Command, based in Florida, that they're very cautious because they've seen this story now for decades, not just with Mr. Maduro or Mr. Chavez, but they don't. Cuba is the main model. 66 years of it's going to go any day. And we have a naval base on Cuba, Guantanamo Bay. And we've had it there since before the Cuban Revolution. So everyone adapts. But the challenge for the Department of Defense and the people in the Department of Defense, no one wants to be the one to tell anyone in the White House or in the State Department, on the 6th or 7th floor of the State Department where the Secretary's office is, we shouldn't do this, Mr. President. Mr. President, this is the wrong approach. Because that's a real easy way to have a quick retirement or simply be fired. So they've got to phrase all of this in a way that, Mr. President, you did something no other president has done in history, and no one can take that away from you. So even if we move backward for a while, Maduro knows that we're serious. So you've done your thing, Mr. President. Look at, it was on Fox News yesterday. Oh, okay. That's where we are.
And John, finally, I just want to ask you about international law. You know, we've spoken over the last two nights a little bit about President Trump initially being critical of interventionist strategies and then becoming, to some degree, interventionist in some areas. International law, multilateralism has been something that he's been very critical of. Do you think could there be a slight turning back to using and leveraging international law to help him with the Maduro case?
Well, he is. If you listen to Stephen Miller, who is his deputy chief of staff, who is the czar for immigration and migration issues, they've justified everything that they've done so far with Venezuela as within international law, as within US law, and they will continue to do that. The challenge is, and President Erdogan of Turkey said this about the UN Security Council. He said that the reason that the UN and the UN Security Council don't work is because when there's a vote against someone, they ignore it. And the only way it's going to work is if a country accepts a decision it doesn't want. And so in the case of international law, you can get a dozen international law books, International Criminal Court, United Nations law, maritime law, and you will always be able to find a group of lawyers who will tell you you're in compliance, and there's always going to be a group in another room who will say this is completely outside of the scope of even thinking about it being a legitimate use of US force.
So in its pure, the argument would be in its purest definition, it's not actually enforceable.
International law? Oh, no. International law is almost not enforceable on anyone, but it's used as justification to do just about anything, as long as it's to your benefit. You know, when you don't like it, it's against international law. When you want it, it's supported by international law. And this is why, you know, every year 193 members of the UN General Assembly get together in New York, and they raise their hands and they put their hands down and they walk away. They've had some nice food, they've given some nice speeches, but how much have they really accomplished?
Now there's a question. John, it's been an absolute delight having you in the studio with us these past 2 nights. We thank you very much indeed for analysis, and we hope to see you again very soon. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll take a short break now, and when we're back, Andy Miosh will be here with the top business news stories of the day. Do stay with us. On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
It's often said the world never sleeps, but who's ready to wake you up with all you need to know about what is happening across the globe and in the region?
We are. Daybreak is live every morning, bringing you a complete wrap-up of the stories from overnight and all the news already happening in the world.
The biggest global headlines, the key regional developments, the must-read stories shaping the day.
We show them, we discuss them, we guide you through their meaning. We give you the news and a first look at the key headlines.
I'm Nadia Johnny.
And I'm Lou Brown.
Join us, it's Daybreak here at A News.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back to Prime Time. Andy Mioch is here with the very latest business news, including, Andy, I think some trouble in the health sector.
That's exactly right, Guy. That long-awaited deal in the U.S. Senate has sent ripples throughout that industry. Tonight, of course, as per usual, we'll take a look at some stocks and earnings as well. We begin with shares of major health insurers that declined sharply after the U.S. Senate approved a deal to end the government shutdown, which is now heading to the House for approval. That deal, however, does not extend Affordable Care Act subsidies, potentially raising future costs for millions of Americans.
Shares of health insurers tumbled after the US Senate struck a deal to end the government shutdown without extending Affordable Care Act subsidies. Shares of Centene slid as much as 10.5%, while Molina Healthcare slipped more than 7.5%, and Elevance Health shed as much as 5%. Disagreement over extending the subsidies, which are due to expire at the end of the year, has been at the heart of the record-long shutdown. Without them, most of the 24 million people enrolled in these plans will see a sharp increase in their health insurance costs for 2026. But Republicans and a small group of Democrats agreed to a December vote on potentially extending the subsidies, which have been in place since 2021. The subsidies have allowed enrollment in the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, to double in size.
In the auto industry, Honda has cut its full-year profit outlook by 20%, citing U.S. tariffs, global chip shortages, and rising production costs. The company also faces increasing competition from Chinese EV makers, eroding its market share in Southeast Asia.
Honda's downgrade to its full-year profit outlook underscores the immediate pressure from US tariffs and global chip shortages. But the deeper, longer-term challenge lies in intensifying competition from Chinese electric vehicle makers. Japan's second-largest automaker cut its full-year outlook by a fifth after the market closed on Friday, citing one-off EV costs and a shortage of components using chips from Netherlands-based Nexperia. The Dutch government took control of the company, owned by China's Wingtech, on September 30th. It also estimated a 385 billion yen hit from US tariffs, although that was less than the 450 billion yen originally flagged. Its shares tumbled 4.7% on Monday. Yet the more pressing concern for Honda, and by extension other Japanese car makers, is the steady erosion of market share in Southeast Asia, a region where they once dominated virtually unchallenged. Until recently, Japanese automakers believed they could shield their Asia businesses outside of China from the kind of slump they were experiencing in the world's largest car market. Executive Vice President Noraya Kaihara said at a briefing on Friday that the challenge goes beyond declining sales and that automakers are responding by ramping up incentives and cutting prices to attract buyers.
In pharma news, AstraZeneca's shares surged past their September 2024 peak after reporting a strong quarterly earnings, supported by a new U.S. drug pricing deal that increased revenue certainty.
Shares in AstraZeneca rose past their September 2024 peak on Tuesday. The fresh record high cements the company's position as the largest UK-listed stock by market value. Tuesday's surge added to the rally after forecast-beating quarterly earnings last week, and a US drug pricing deal in October that helped remove some policy uncertainty. The United States accounts for more than 40% of AstraZeneca's total sales. In early trade, AstraZeneca was up 2.5%, giving it a market value of close to $282 billion.
Japanese entertainment giant Sony has upgraded its full-year profit forecast by 8%, driven by higher sales in entertainment and chips, and a lesser-than-expected impact of US tariffs on its operations.
Sony raised its operating profit forecast for the year by 8% on Tuesday. The Japanese giant now foresees $9.5 billion in gains for the 12 months ending in March. It cited a smaller-than-expected impact from US tariffs and showed confidence about the strength of its entertainment and chips businesses. Operating profit in the July to September quarter rose a tenth to $2.8 billion. That after its music unit, which includes anime and chips businesses, saw higher sales. The conglomerate was once best known for household electronics, but it's become an entertainment powerhouse and bet on the growth of anime. Profit at Sony's games business fell in the second quarter after the company booked impairment losses from the Destiny 2 video game. The firm sold 3.9 million units of its PlayStation 5 during the quarter, in a slight rise from the same period a year earlier. Sony is also a leading manufacturer of image sensors used in smartphones. It said sales of larger sensors boosted its chips unit during the quarter. Sony further updated its outlook on the impact of US trade tariffs for the financial year to $324 million. That's down from the more than $450 million projection it made in August. Sony's shares closed up 5.5% following the earnings release.
In other earnings news, SoftBank's quarterly profit more than doubled, fueled by valuation gains in its AI investments. The company's share price hit a new record high, reflecting confidence in its technology portfolio.
SoftBank Group Chief Executive Masayoshi Son's all-in bet on OpenAI appears to be paying dividends after the ChatGPT maker's valuation soared this year, producing a surge in quarterly profit for the Japanese technology investor. SoftBank reported on Tuesday's second quarter net profit more than doubled to $16.6 billion, driven by valuation gains in its OpenAI holdings. The results mean more money for SoftBank to employ in its artificial intelligence-related investment spree, even as concerns mount of an AI bubble in which valuations overestimate the profits the technologies can generate. It has also stepped up fundraising activities, selling equity holdings, such as the remainder of its shares in Nvidia for $5.83 billion, as well as issuing bonds and taking out bridging loans. The second quarter earnings coincide with a bull run in technology-related stocks that has sent SoftBank's share price to record highs.
And finally, Lisbon's Web Summit opened in Portugal, gathering more than 70,000 entrepreneurs, investors, and startups from around the world, spotlighting the latest and greatest in technology.
Lisbon is hosting the Web Summit Technology Conference, drawing startups, investors, and exhibitors for networking opportunities and entrepreneur collaboration. The summit opened on Monday, with artificial intelligence as the most prominent feature of this year's edition. Among the key topics is so-called vibe coding, a form of programming that uses AI to generate code, with discussions focusing on whether it marks the next major leap or the end of programming, and on who controls AI and who benefits from it. According to the organizers, as AI models are trained on online content, the competition for access and profit is becoming increasingly fierce. This year's Web Summit, running until Thursday, is expected to welcome more than 70,000 attendees, over 2,500 startups showcasing products and services, and more than 1,000 investors. Founded in 2009 in Dublin, the Web Summit has since expanded globally, with previous events in 2025 held in Qatar, Canada, and Brazil.
And that is a wrap on today's Business Brief. Back to you, Guy.
Thanks, Andy. Fascinating roundup as usual. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, France's former president, Nicolas Sarkozy, is home tonight after a Paris court let him walk free pending appeal. We'll look at what this release means for France's political class next.
What is power? Has leadership truly evolved, or are the old rules of geopolitics still pulling the strings behind the scenes? Who is really powerful? And what makes people feel powerless? Our new series explores the secrets, strategies, and consequences of power.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption. Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay. Challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories. Welcome to Gabala. Hi, Candy. One important note to clear. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are reporting on the 8th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kiev, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul for A News.
Welcome back. You're watching PrimeTime. Over to France now, and Nicolas Sarkozy has spent his first night back at home after walking free from prison in Paris. A court has ruled that he can remain out while appealing his conviction for allegedly conspiring to secure campaign funds from Libya, a case that's once again dividing French politics.
Arriving home at his French residence in Paris on Monday, former President Nicolas Sarkozy described his incarceration as tough and draining. He wrote on social media that he would now focus on the appeal process and said that the end of the story remains to be written. The 70-year-old was jailed on the 21st October after a court found him guilty in September of criminal conspiracy over efforts by close aides to procure funds for his 2007 presidential bid from the late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. He has consistently denied any wrongdoing and describes himself as a victim of revenge and political hostility. He was acquitted of all other charges, including corruption and receiving illegal campaign financing. On Monday, a Paris court ruled he could be released while he appeals against his conviction under strict judicial supervision, saying that Sarkozy didn't pose a flight risk. He's banned from leaving the country and from contacting any Justice Ministry officials while his appeal is underway. Despite his release, the 5-year sentence remains in place pending the appeal.
Okay, joining me now in the studio to discuss this further is A News's Katie Wilson. Katie, interesting case this, what's happened over the last few days. Where exactly has the former president been held? I mean, are we talking somewhere with bars at the window, prison uniform? Give us a sense of where he's been and also how events have unfolded today.
So not quite. Sarkozy's been held in the isolation wing of La Santé prison in Paris, and for security reasons, since he's a prominent figure, that's why he's been held away from the general prison population. That's what tends to happen. There's been other prominent figures that have been held there. Sometimes they're called the isolation wing or the VIP wing. In his cell, he's had a toilet, a shower, a desk, a small electric hob and a small TV. He paid a monthly €14 fee for that and a small fridge. He also had the right to receive information from the outside world and family visits, as well as written and phone contact. But other than that, he was essentially in solitary confinement. He was allowed just 1 hour a day for exercise, and he did that by himself in the wing's segregated courtyard, and 2 bodyguards were stationed in nearby cells because the Interior Minister, Laurent Nunez, said that was due to Sarkozy's status. And Sarkozy did speak about being in jail, and he said it was tough, really tough, and as it must be for any detainee, I'd even say it's draining. And if we look back to the events of yesterday, so immediately after the former president was sentenced about 3 weeks ago, his legal team had filed a request seeking his release, and a court ruled on Monday that he could be freed pending an appeal for his conviction. The court said he didn't represent a flight risk and therefore didn't have to remain in prison until his appeal. But it's worth pointing out that this release is no indication of whether his appeal is likely to succeed. It's based on specific criteria, such as whether there is a risk that he could flee.
And now that he is out, Katie, I mean, how free is he to move around and go about his business?
Yes, so just to recap, yesterday Sarkozy's car was seen leaving the prison in Paris less than an hour and a half after the court agreed to his early release, and soon after he was seen arriving at home in Western Paris. But he has been released under judicial control with specific conditions being placed on him, and in particular that's regards to who he can contact. So Sarkozy is forbidden from contacting people implicated in his case, so that could be any other defendants or any witnesses in this so-called Libyan dossier. And there's also a specific ban on him contacting the current French Justice Minister, Gérald Darmanin, and that's because during his time in prison, Darmanin visited him, and that prompted 30 French lawyers to file a complaint against the current Justice Minister, highlighting what they say is a conflict of interest, saying because he's a former colleague and he's a friend of Sarkozy's. He's also forbidden from leaving France ahead of the appeal trial, which is due to be held next year. So there are quite strict restrictions on Sarkozy.
And talking of lawyers, what are we hearing right now from Sarkozy's legal team?
So they've been hailing this release as a step forward and the normal implementation of the law, arguing that a continued imprisonment wouldn't have actually been justified because he wasn't a flight risk and he's always been cooperating with the judiciary. And just to bring you some key lines from the legal team, they say the battle is far from over and that their focus will now shift to the appeal hearing, which is scheduled for spring of 2026. And Sarkozy's lawyers also highlighted the personal toll that this has taken on him and stressed that being in that solitary confinement has been a very difficult experience. Sarkozy added to this he was speaking to a court in Paris via video link on Monday and described his time in solitary confinement as grueling and a nightmare. And the legal team also highlighted concerns for his safety. They mentioned that Sarkozy had faced death threats despite the isolation from general prison population, and that being out of prison is actually safer for him. And they praised the court's decision as a correct application of French law because that generally favours release pending appeal and reserves detention for specific higher risk scenarios. And Sarkozy himself has been speaking out. Just hours after he was released, he took to social media. He said that his energy is focused solely on the single goal of proving my innocence. He says the truth will prevail and the end of the story is yet to be written. So he's maintaining his innocence there. Sarkozy also paid tribute to prison staff who had made his time in prison bearable. And he said they'd shown exceptional humanity. We've also heard from some members of Sarkozy's family. His youngest son, Louis Sarkozy, also posted "Vive la liberté," that long live freedom, on his own X account around the time of the release.
Very interesting. So we've heard from the family, from the former president himself, from the authorities, from the lawyers. What about the general public? Because Sarkozy has been a polarising figure, hasn't he? Where is the general public at the moment on this case?
So the public are generally split on this. There was a poll conducted over the weekend before his release, and they found that 45% of the public thought he should be freed pending his appeal, and 42% thought that he should remain in prison. And the public reaction, it's largely divided along political lines here. So Sarkozy's supporters, they're generally on the right, and they've been expressing relief and vindication. And when Sarkozy arrived home, there was actually crowds of supporters there to greet him, and conservative media outlets in France have been covering this case with a lot of sympathy. On the left, however, that's generally the critics of Sarkozy, they've questioned a legal process that would lead to such a short time in prison, just 3 weeks of a 5-year sentence, and it's raised debates about equal justice and political influence here. And remember, the court did find these crimes to be of extraordinary seriousness. And that initial decision to send him to prison was widely approved of by the left, and about 60% of the public in an earlier poll had shared that approval of sending him to prison. The French President Emmanuel Macron, he hasn't publicly commented on Sarkozy's release when Sarkozy was initially imprisoned. Macron stated that it wasn't his role to comment on or criticise judicial decisions, but he did, however, receive Sarkozy at the Élysée Palace just shortly before he entered prison, and Macron defended that visit on a human level and said it was a meeting as a predecessor. So yeah, differing reactions there from across the political spectrum.
Very split. And Sarkozy, as he puts it, his nightmare of confinement is over for now at least. But what's next in the process?
So the next major step in this legal process will be his appeal trial, and that's expected to take place in spring next year. In the meantime, as I mentioned, he's subject to those judicial supervisions, but this isn't the only legal battle that Sarkozy is facing. A separate final ruling from France's highest court regarding his 2012 illegal campaign financing case, that's known as the Big Million affair, that's expected in November 2025, so pretty imminently. And Sarkozy also faces another ongoing investigation for being an accessory to witness tampering. And just to remind you, Sarkozy, he was president from 2007 to 2012, and ever since he's left office, he's been facing these criminal inquiries, and for months he had to wear an electronic tag around his ankle after a conviction last December for trying to bribe a magistrate for confidential information about a separate case. So this certainly isn't the last we're going to be hearing about Sarkozy.
Not the last we're going to hear it. Fascinating story. Katie, thanks so much for staying on top of it. Thank you. Okay, we'll take a short break now. Coming up, we'll head over to Brazil, where A News's Orkan Amashov is covering COP30 for us. Do stay with us.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back. You're watching PrimeTime. Now, over in Brazil, world leaders and delegates have gathered for COP30 in Belém. A decade on from the Paris Agreement, the focus now is on delivery, not declarations. Azerbaijan's Mukhtar Babayev has formally handed the chairmanship to Brazil, and calls grow for urgent, tangible climate action and a sharper global pace on change.
Delegates from more than 190 countries gathered on Monday for the opening of COP30 in Belém, Brazil, aiming to push forward climate action and reverse the course of global warming a decade after the Paris Agreement. Azerbaijan officially handed over the COP chairmanship to Brazil. Speaking at the ceremony, COP29, Chair Mukhtar Babayev urged countries to honor past commitments while formally passing leadership to Brazil, and COP30 President André Correa do Lago. He highlighted Azerbaijan's role in advancing global climate goals and reminded delegates of last year's historic Baku finance goal, stressing that the world now needs concrete action, not just debate.
Science is our compass.
COP30 President André Correa do Lago formally opened the summit, describing it as a COP of implementation. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva echoed the call for urgent action.
It's time to inflict another defeat on the deniers. Without the Paris Agreement, the world would be doomed to catastrophic warming of almost 5 degrees by the end of the century. We are moving in the right direction, but at the wrong speed.
He urged nations to invest in climate solutions rather than war. UN Climate Change Executive Secretary Simon Steele further emphasized the scale of the challenge. He noted that current climate pledges could reduce global emissions by 12% by 2035.
But friends, let me be clear. In this arena of COP30, your job here is not to fight one another. Your job here is to fight this climate crisis together. Paris is working to deliver real progress. Let's not forget that.
Steele also confirmed that U.S. contributions to the UN's climate budget for the coming fiscal year were covered by philanthropic donations, after the United States skipped the summit entirely. Empty U.S. seats were a visible reminder of its absence. Germany also took the floor, defending its climate finance contributions. State Secretary Jochen Flassbart highlighted Germany's support for the Tropical Forest Forever facility.
Germany has been instrumental throughout the last 1.5 years. We contributed financially to the preparation of this COP with regard to the TFFF. And the German Chancellor announced that Germany is in support of the TFFF and will contribute substantially also finance-wise.
The voices of the private sector and indigenous communities were also heard. Over the course of the first week, negotiators are expected to outline priorities, explore one another's positions, and announce action plans and financing pledges. The Amazon city of Belém will host discussions on climate finance, adaptation, and mitigation, with the summit unfolding against the backdrop of global conflicts and the absence of the United States, a key historical emitter.
Okay, let's cross live now to Orkan Amishov, who is at the event at COP30 for us. Orkan, fantastic to see you. One of the things, Orkan, that I remember so vividly when we were together at COP29 was this sense of adults in the room, sensible, healthy disagreements between countries. I wanted to ask you, we're now in day 2 of this event. Yesterday brought plenty of pledges. Behind the scenes, though, are there any divisions, disagreements which have emerged?
Yeah, there is a degree of concurrence, Guy, but also there are lines of division when it comes to different negotiators and different parties. You're absolutely right about that sense of responsibility and a sense of clarity and sense of purpose. We know that, Guy, the agenda was adopted yesterday. There's no doubt about that. But that agenda is not specific enough, because the agenda was meant to include priorities in such a way that would have enabled this conference, the 30th meeting of the Conference of Parties, to attain the declared objectives. So caveat here is that during the course of next 2 days, some of the vague elements of that agenda will still be discussed. So that's number one point. I suppose number 2 point here is that this COP is going to be massively focused on the deforestation, adaptation in particular, and the climate finance goal, of course, despite the fact that this COP is not specifically centered around the NCQG that we you and I were focusing on during COP29. Still, finance is going to be one of the key elements. And one of the deliverables which we need to mention is $40 billion US pledge specifically dedicated to adaptation. And that's what Mukhtar Babayev said yesterday. That was supposed to be attained by now, but probably by the end of the year, that objective will be attained. But more specifically, in terms of this melange of two different factors, adaptation and mitigation, what I've noticed during my communication with delegates here is that developed countries are reluctant to invest in adaptation-related funds or facilities because they don't trust the financial transparency exercised by developing countries. And they are more inclined towards contributing towards mitigation-related matters. What we have heard regarding the reported submitted NDCs, nationally determined contributions, that greenhouse gas emission curve is projected to decline by 12% by 2030. 12% decline in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 is not bad. It's symbolically important, but not at all sufficient. The actual figure must be around 50-60% if we want to attain that mitigation objective set out by the parties. So it's a mixture of two really factors. There is a sense of realism that this COP will not sort out all the problems, but there's also the sense that actually it's quite possible that we will, like as was the case in Basque, we need to set out bigger objective to be able to attain at least considerable fraction of that objective.
Yeah, and Orkan, Brazil's President Lula has said that this will be the COP of implementation. You've been out and about, not just following the delegations of world leaders, but also our viewers will have seen you out and about speaking to, visiting many different local people. How is that message landing on the ground?
Well, I think as long as the local population here is concerned, the president of Brazil is very popular amongst those people that I've spoken to. There is a deal of skepticism when it comes to that question about this COP being a COP of implementation. Practically all COPs, all conference of parties were meant to be about implementation. Back last year in Baku, we were talking about enhancing ambition and enabling action. So that COP was about actually implementation, and effectively the $300 billion US NCKG that was agreed upon was implementable decision. So that was some sort of implementation, although let's be very clear, that amount of money as agreed upon has not been mobilized yet. Regarding Brazil's role, Brazil is a rising power. It's a power with a great future, and the president is highly respected by many people that I've seen here. But what we noticed that his approach towards other leaders during day one, his disinclination to take that family photo as quickly as that photo was supposed to be taken, has given rise to the assumption by many people that Brazil is deeply unhappy and dissatisfied with the approach maintained by developed countries. That global north and global south division is still there. Brazil naturally firmly in the global south camp. And ultimately, in terms of practicable actions, in terms of this COP being COP of implementation, one particular idea which has been floating and been in the grapevine was about specific $1 trillion US fund dedicated to the problem of deforestation, and some sort of pledge emerging as a result of this conference. But nothing has emerged. And on the basis of my conversation with delegates here, it looks like that developed countries are very skeptical about that fund. Because when we talk about $1.3 trillion US fund to deal with the problem of deforestation, we're not talking about a fund currently now being funneled into the needs of those people who need that, but actually formulating some form of declaration. Highly unlikely that declaration will emerge as a result of this COP.
Talking of sceptical countries, Orkan, I need to ask you about the United States. They're obviously not at the event. How has that played in terms of other major countries, Germany, China, for example? Have they noticeably taken the tone, the shape of negotiations in the US's absence, do you think?
Well, China itself is not highly represented here, by the way. The president is not here. High-level representatives of the of the Republic of China is not here. People's Republic of China are not here. And Chinese position is very unique in terms of its greenhouse gas emission being absolutely massive, but China being very much interested in the export of green technologies. And this is not the case with the United States. I think the lack of high-level representation from countries like US, China, and India, which are actually the biggest polluters, has been very, very negatively evaluated by many actors here. And of course, it will have some bearing upon the attainment of the objectives. Because let's be very clear, United States of America has officially withdrawn from the Paris Agreement, which was adopted back in 2015. It doesn't necessarily mean the US is no longer part of the UNFCCC, which is the convention itself, not the agreement. But the lack of US representation, the rhetoric employed by President Donald Trump, and his inherent and very palpable skepticism about the entire subject of climate diplomacy and climate sensitivities have made many delegates here less hopeful about the objectives. But ultimately, I think when it comes to the key deliverables, and the key deliverables here are largely revolving around adaptation, consensus will emerge. That consensus will not be sufficiently good enough, but I'm sure COP30 presidents will do its level best to ensure that that is being presented as a massive success. I noticed this element yesterday, because you remember back in Baku, there was absolutely no need to present anything as a massive success. On day 1 or 2, we had this Article 6.264 advance breakthrough. That was absolutely crucial, because for 10 years, from 2015 onwards up to 2024, for 9 years, the intense negotiation had been underway about that subject, and COP29 delivered. COP29 delivered on the loss and damage front, and ultimately on the NCQG. This COP has so far not been marked with any breakthrough. And even the adoption of the agenda has been presented as a success of some sort. But I have some deal of, there are caveats about that as well, because, as I said, the agenda is all about priorities, and priorities must be clear, and they're not clear at all in view of many people. And also, what I've heard, and what seems to be very clear, this COP30 presidency does not have proper enforcing mechanism in order to intensify the decision-making process, which is also a downside. But ultimately, let's have a balanced outlook of what's happening. All in good time. Today is only day 2. And I think that expecting something very big and very definitive on day 2 would be too precipitate.
Very much so. Difficult, though, I guess, for the organisers to follow an event that was termed the Baku breakthrough, where there were such clear-cut objectives that were agreed. I just want to turn, though, to the local situation again, because our viewers did see you out and about on the famous river, of course, meeting local people. We know there has been strong turnout from indigenous leaders across the Amazon. Are their voices genuinely influencing talks on deforestation, finance, etc., or is this really, are they being sidelined to some degree?
Well, it's very difficult to respond to the question with a degree of clarity. Indeed, I've spoken to the locals, indigenous people residing in the Amazon, and quite frankly, they believe that their voices must be heard. And there is a tendency among the organizers to make sure that, in view of the perceived public decline in trust in climate diplomacy, it's vital that this COP is also presented, or if you like, touted, not just as a COP enabling, and not just a COP of implementation or COP of truth, but also a people's COP. And that is exactly about those indigenous communities. I think, bearing in mind that Amazon Basin is home to 30 million population, bearing in mind that those people actually, there are 400 indigenous ethnic groups speaking 200 languages. It's an integral part of the country, which is Brazil's overall population is 210 million people. It is vital that the needs of those people are addressed, because there's also a question of the electability for this government, I imagine, because they are forming the considerable chunk of the overall population. And they're capable of influencing the decision-making process. And also, their fate is everybody's able to observe what's happening in the Amazon. The river levels go up and down. The pollution is a massive problem. People's livelihoods depend on the Amazon River, which is facing existential crisis. to what extent, to go back to your question, because you're asking a very specific question, I want to be very clear in my answer. To what extent, if you ask me, their feelings and their reservations actually going to bear upon the decision making here, that's going to be quite considerable, but not fundamentally decisive if you ask me. Because after all, I've also noticed an element of what I would very cautiously call disconnect between what's happening there in the depths of the Amazon and within the confines of this COP30 hall. Because after all, congregations are all about making decisions, employing different elaborate terminology. And I don't, on the basis of my communication with those members of the indigenous community, by the way, I had a few chats with them before coming to the venue today as well, and our viewers will be able to watch those interviews. I think my feeling is that their concerns are being taken into account and they will have some bearing, but not a definitive bearing upon the ultimate decision making.
Yeah, very difficult to bring so many diverse points of view together, isn't it? And to achieve anything like a consensus. Or can one of my abiding memories of working with you at COP29 was standing in front of the cameras with those doors behind us, waiting for the doors to open, wondering when or if they would open with some final agreement. I know we're only on day 2 at the moment. What is your sense of what might happen, the likelihood of success, and what needs to happen over the coming hours for this to be considered a success?
Indeed, success is a very relative notion. I'm sure COP30 presidency will, and also partners and actors, and it will be doing their level best to make sure anything tangibly important will be kind of presented as a success. I mean, the atmospherics here are slightly different. First of all, there are climatic things to be borne in mind. It's incredibly warm and humid here. Organizers have been doing their level best to make sure everything is properly organized, but there are, of course, certain limitations. We are facing this, what is fashionable to call in this part of Brazil, the Amazon 2 p.m. Downpour, when this rain starts abruptly and it finishes as quickly as it starts. So there are a lot of logistical problems, and in the fact that I've always been joining from this part of the conference zone is down to the internet-related matters, because I can't join from the other part. But these problems are being sort of gradually sorted out, and I've been speaking to the organizers. They're doing their level best, and they receive huge support from COP29 presidency. You asked a very specific question: what should happen for this COP30 to achieve something quite tangible? I think that's fundamentally cooperation. What Simon Still, UN climate chief, said earlier, the Paris Agreement has not really achieved what perhaps it was set out to achieve, but without those mechanisms in place, we would have been in a position of finding ourselves in a far more complicated situation, and our predicament would have been far more dangerous. So effectively, this multilateral diplomacy, for all of its difficulties, for all that, this sort of the process which is taking a lot of time, this delays, dithering and all that thing, different parties trying to push their own agenda. Despite all of these factors, I think that some consensus will emerge, and that's going to be probably about deforestation. I expect some sort of a specific declaration with a sort of an implementable financial mechanism related to deforestation. I think, despite the fact that US President Donald Trump is not here, and US is not represented here at the highest possible level, and this self-same pattern applies to India and China, I think that the presence here of the high-level delegation from the UK, the Prime Minister, a member of the royal family, and other countries, I think all of this cumulatively have played a very, very important role. And the relationship and cooperation, in particular, between Azerbaijan and Brazil, COP29 and COP30 presidencies, and the UK being a very important part of this wider negotiations, a wider mechanism, gives rise to the hopes that ultimately that decision will be enforced. Because we will have a long process. Probably, I imagine there will be delay. Probably this conference is not going to end on the 21st of November, probably on the 22nd of November. And something related to adaptation, very tangible, will be adopted. I expect the mechanism related to that $40 billion pledge regarding implementation achieving, or rather assuming, more tangible shape and form which will be later incorporated into the final verdict of this COP30 as one of the things that will happen in 10 days' time.
Orkan, we thank you. It's always great to hear you, and we look forward to coming back tomorrow and finding out all that has happened. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Okay, after the break, Pakistan has warned the UN that weapons abandoned in Afghanistan are resurfacing in militant hands, fueling border violence and regional instability. Do stay with us.
It's often said the world never sleeps, but who's ready to wake you up with all you need to know about what is happening across the globe and in the region?
We are. Daybreak is live every morning, bringing you a complete wrap-up of the stories from overnight and all the news already happening in the world.
The biggest global headlines, the key regional developments, the must-read stories shaping the day.
We show them, we discuss them, we guide you through their meaning. We give you the news and a first look at the key headlines.
I'm Nadia Jani.
And I'm Lou Brown.
Join us, it's Daybreak here at A News.
Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent.
Hello, I'm Jay. That challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories.
Welcome to Gabala. Hi, Candy. One important note.
To Fierce.
I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are recording on the 8th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro,
Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad,
Istanbul,
Kabul, for A News.
Welcome back, you're watching PrimeTime. Now, Pakistan is warning the United Nations that weapons left behind in Afghanistan are now turning up in the hands of militant groups. Islamabad said arms abandoned after foreign troop withdrawals are fueling cross-border violence and destabilising the region, calling on the world to act before those weapons of war become tools of terror once again. Pakistan's message to the world tonight: stop the spillover. Let's get the full story now from our correspondent Hira Mustafa in Islamabad.
Well, Guy, Pakistan's permanent representative to the United Nations, Asim Iftikhar, has raised alarm this week over the growing threat posed by abandoned weapons in Afghanistan. Addressing the UN Security Council session on Monday, he said Islamabad has credible evidence of attempts to smuggle these weapons into neighboring countries for use in terrorist activities. He has urged the international community to take urgent measures to prevent militant groups from gaining access to the weapons and ammunition, warning this risk fueling instability across the region. The Pakistani envoy also called on the Afghan interim authorities to fulfill their international obligations and ensure that these weapons are secured and kept out of the hands of extremists. Diplomatic observers say the timing of Pakistan's warning is highly significant. It comes as tensions between Islamabad and Kabul remain strained following a series of fierce border clashes last month that left dozens dead, including soldiers on both sides. The two countries have accused each other of violating ceasefire arrangements and failing to control cross-border attacks. Pakistan maintains that militant outfits such as the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and the Balochistan Liberation Army are using Afghan soil to carry out terrorist activities on the country's western borders. Officials in Islamabad argue that the presence of these groups threatens not only Pakistan's internal security but also wider regional peace. Kabul, however, denies these allegations. Analysts note that Islamabad's remarks at the UN reflect growing frustration over what it sees as Afghanistan's lack of action against anti-Pakistan militant networks. Both countries have held 2 rounds of peace talks in Istanbul, mediated by Qatar and Turkey, following a temporary ceasefire agreement reached in Doha on October 19th. Observers are concerned the tensions between the two could escalate into a full-scale conflict rather than remain a limited cross-border clash.
Okay, joining us now to discuss this in more detail is Hamad Al-Mashriqi, a geopolitical analyst in Islamabad, Pakistan. Thank you very much, Hamad, for joining us. Quite a stark warning then from Pakistan. How seriously is the international community likely to take this claim about weapons from Afghanistan, do you think?
Thank you very much. I'm sure, this is a time when world must take it very seriously, because it is not only an allegation, but it is something which Pakistan have alarmed the world with the evidence and with the proof that whatever Americans have left, in terms of so much ammunition and weapons, they are going into the hands of the, terrorist organization.
Okay, we're having a few...
At the moment,
apologies for a few technical problems. We'll be back with Mr. Al-Mashriqi as soon as we possibly can.
Yes.
Okay, we've got you now back. Well, thank you very much. Just bear with us. We're going to go back now to our guests to carry on this very interesting discussion from Islamabad in Pakistan. Okay, Hamad, thank you for that. Sorry, 1 or 2 technical problems connecting to you there in Islamabad. Let's just go back to this question then. Serious claim, a stark warning. You mentioned, though, the US leaving weapons behind. How much responsibility do you think lies with the US and the allies for leaving behind military hardware?
Definitely, there is a lot of responsibility of USA and Joe Biden administration at that time, which has been mentioned by President Trump many times. Even at that time, and since he has come into White House, he has clearly mentioned that it was a very bad withdrawal of USA from Afghanistan, and that's why the world is facing the consequences, and especially Pakistan is the one who's suffering the most consequences. Since 9/11, Pakistan was on the front foot of the war against terror. We lost over 80,000 personnel, including the 12,000 people from security forces. We had losses of billions of dollars. And sadly, now in the region, because of Afghanistan have become a place of harboring the terrorism for the and is using as a proxy for different nations. I mean, India is using Afghanistan soil for its proxy, against Pakistan, using terrorist organization to do the terrorism across border inside Pakistan, particularly in Balochistan province and KPK. Then on the other hand, there is a clear threat of ISIS and Al-Qaeda is there. Then there is, as a matter of fact, only 45% of the Afghanistan is still under control of Afghan current regime. Rest of the 55% is controlled by different, tribal power holds and others. So this is very critical situation, and Pakistan's warning in the United Nations is based on reality, facts, and this is the time when I believe that the United Nations, along with the United States, they have to react and they have to come up with some kind of action plan against Afghanistan, so that they will not be able to misuse these all left weapons and all ammunition. And Pakistan, because of having a over 2600 kilometers border or Durand line, Pakistan is always very vulnerable to those terrorists who do the cross-border terrorism, and Pakistan is suffering. Even today, we had a bomb blast in Islamabad, which has give over 12 casualties. So Pakistan's stance is very clear that we want Afghanistan to prosper, but we definitely want Afghan regime to take the responsibility to stop any kind of terrorism, especially supported by Indian elements, supported by ISIS or Al Qaeda elements, and because their regime is in a mode of denial. That is a very sad part. As you know, we had been in dialogues with them just in last few weeks, and 2 weeks ago as well, and last week as well, whether it was in Doha, whether it was in Istanbul. Pakistan's emphasizes only on one point agenda, and that agenda is stop the cross-border terrorism, stop infiltration in Pak soil, and bring justice to all the terrorists inside Afghanistan. Because otherwise, Pakistan would have no choice but to do some kind of I would say the strikes inside Afghanistan, because Pakistan cannot bear any more losses for its security forces or its civilians. That is a clear message which I think has been given in the United Nations, and it's been given to directly to Afghan government as well.
And you speak there about the potential risk. I mean, let's talk about the risk. There is a huge amount of tension in the region. Do you think that whichever side of this conflict you're on, the fact that there is now escalating arms flow, could that potentially reignite instability, do you think, across the wider region, obviously particularly along the border?
Yes, definitely. I mean, it may escalate the situation very drastically, and it will be very, I would say, fatal for the region and the rest of the world as well, because Pakistan is being as a shield or safeguard or buffer zone between Afghanistan and the rest of the world to stop the terrorism. But if Pakistan will suffer, the rest of the world will suffer the consequences as well. That's why Pakistan have clearly given the dossiers of harboring terrorism inside Afghanistan by different organizations. Pakistan has given the clear evidence that Afghan regime is not behaving responsibly towards handling those organizations, whether they are attached to separatist organization or terrorist organizations, or they are working as proxies. Pakistan have clearly spoken about the approach of Afghan regime, where they are having a soft corner for the terrorist organizations such as TTP and BLA. And having the soft corner means that they are allowed to do their activities across the border, because they do not do any terror activities inside Afghanistan. Rather, their target is to destabilize the rest of the countries, and particularly the neighboring countries. And I mean, they will carry on doing these. And because countries like Azerbaijan, countries like China, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Iran, Pakistan, they all will suffer, because the whole region will suffer from the terrorist wave which will be initiating from the Afghan soil.
Mr.
So it is at the moment,
I do apologise for butting in.
Yeah.
We thank you very much indeed. We are very grateful to your analysis, particularly with bearing with us during the technical issue. But thank you very much for joining us from Islamabad.
My pleasure.
Okay, joining me now to tell us all about the trending social media posts that are out there today is A-News's Guli Garadagli. Guli, what's happening out there in the digital world?
A lot is happening online today. Let's get into it. We start with tragic news from the South Caucasus. A Turkish military cargo plane has crashed near the Georgia-Azerbaijan border earlier today. President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, has sent his condolences to Turkey. Now switching gears to Ukraine, it was a blink and you'll miss it moment. The lights went out right in the middle of President Zelensky's interview with The Guardian in Kiev. It's a small moment that says a lot about what life in Kiev looks like right now.
So we've seen some crazy stuff in the last couple of months. Russian. Hello.
Hard times. Electricity.
Electricity is gone.
Not everything.
Okay, good. Oh my God.
Це вирубається, да?
We're switching to generator right now.
Нормально. Наші життєві.
This is our, daily conditions, daily life.
Yeah.
All right, let's head to Brazil. When you think of COP30, you think of the Amazon, but Brazil's leaders want the world to remember something else. It's not just a rainforest, it's a home to millions of people who need protecting too.
I think this opportunity is a highlight opportunity to put Amazon rainforest in the central agenda in COP30. We need urgent actions to engage the leaders to most fund and ask the climate events sometimes. So I believe in COP30 we deliver more results, more ambitions and policies to create the balance, they reduce the deforestation, the development, the sustainable development and the environmental agendas.
Thank you. And today's agenda will be adopted. Do you think it will be adopted by the end of the day? And what will be the key priority within the agenda?
The priority agenda create and value the life force. We need preserve the forest, but together we need care the people. In my region, we have the biggest rainforest, but living here 29 million people. So we need balance the sustainable solutions, the environmental solutions, the preserve the forest, together care the people.
While Brazil is pushing to protect its forests, Azerbaijan is reminding everyone what really makes climate action possible. Let's be honest, when it comes to climate action, a lot of the time it all comes down to money. Azerbaijan's head of COP29 reminded everyone that without real financial support, especially for vulnerable countries, big climate goals really can't happen.
Without Baku finance goal, without finance, nothing to do, because all the plans, all these
investment or subsidies to the vulnerable countries. It depends to the financial decisions made in Baku. That's why today so important to start to implement the process, start to implement the contributions. That's why we today represent the document, invoice for the donors to perform their pledge, their obligations for adaptation funds, so for other funds related to the vulnerable countries, to the developing world. Because Global South, especially seeds and LDCs, they are in the heart of our discussions, heart of our negotiations. And if you remember, in Baku, the president of Azerbaijan, he focused to this issue, how to protect these people, how to assist these people, how to contribute to these people, because they lead in the front line of the climate crisis. We need to assist them.
Back home in Azerbaijan, though, the focus isn't on money, it's on something far more colorful. It might be just a fruit to some, but in Azerbaijan, the pomegranate is so much more. It's a symbol of life, love, and unity. And every November, the whole country celebrates it in a burst of red.
Some see it as a fruit, others as a symbol of life and abundance, but in Azerbaijan, it's a celebration painted in red. Every November, the Goyche city of Azerbaijan becomes the land of pomegranates.
We are in Goyche, in the heart of Azerbaijan's pomegranate season. Pomegranate festival is in full swing with music and colors. Let's explore the festival.
Now in its 16th edition, the festival brings together thousands of people, local residents, guests, state and government officials, as well as Azerbaijani and foreign business representatives. People feel a strong sense of pride and joy, seeing how the festival celebrates their traditions and brings communities together.
I like the decorations, even the fun in the another park, and also it made me happy.
I participate in the Pomegranate Festival every year. It leaves a very pleasant impression. I wish such holidays were held everywhere in my homeland.
I came from Baku. The festival is celebrated at a high level. In fact, this is my first visit to Goyche, but I can say that everything is beautiful, including the nature.
More than 65 stands were set up at the event, featuring pomegranate products from local enterprises, various types of pomegranates grown by farmers, and handmade crafts inspired by the fruit. Visitors enjoyed tastings, fairs, masterclasses, art exhibitions, competitions, and performances by folk groups. The festival aims to preserve and promote the region's pomegranate growing traditions, transform these traditions into a tourism product, and expand sales and promotion opportunities for local producers.
The festival isn't just about the fruit, there are also competitions for the largest pomegranate, and he is the winner of that competition.
Welcome to Goyche. Every year, there are competitions among pomegranates according to their size. The owner of the biggest pomegranate gets a prize. This year, I was chosen as the winner, as the owner of the biggest pomegranate.
Since its launch in 2006, the Pomegranate Festival in Goyche has become a highlight of Azerbaijan's agro-tourism, celebrating both culture and agriculture. Recognised by UNESCO in 2020 as part of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity, the festival honours Goyche's famed pomegranates.
And speaking of color, we're heading east now, where ancient history meets modern flair. What happens when you mix Silk Road history with modern-day style? You get Ardahiva, Uzbekistan's newest travel hotspot. Our very own Sabina Abubekirova takes us there.
Currently, we're a few kilometers away from ancient Khiva in Uzbekistan, exploring Arday Khiva. This is a new tourist complex that was built on a land that once belonged to the Amudarya riverbed. It's inspired by the spirit of the Silk Road. Now it's filled with lakes, Eastern-style bazaars, craft workshops, and even water parks. We continue to explore Khiva in Uzbekistan. We have visited the Nuralboy Palace, a fascinating palace complex built in the early 20th century, just outside the old city. Inside, you'll spot a unique blend of East meets West, gilded chandeliers, parquet floors alongside traditional Khwarezm design. And here's a fun fact: a merchant sold this garden to a Khan on one condition: the name stays the same. And Khan kept his promise. During our visit to Khiva, we had an opportunity to visit several factories. First one was the Khiva Carpet Factory, one of the largest carpet-making enterprises in the region. This plant produces hundreds of thousands of square meters of carpet each month. The second stop was the newly launched Khiva Cluster Textile Factory. Here, local cotton from the Khwarezm region is turned into yarn, fabric, and ready-made clothes. The factory produces millions of garments each year, most of them for export. We're about to enter Ichanghala, the walled-old city at the heart of Khiva, and quite literally a living museum. Inside we will find nearly 60 historic monuments, palaces, madrasas, and the famous Kala Minar. Even though it's a museum city, it's also home to around 300 families who live here, work here, and keep traditions alive. One of the last stops in Uzbekistan for us was at Uli-Hovli. This was a fortress complex near Khiva, built in the 17th century to protect caravan routes between Khiva and Urgench. Today it's been restored as a living cultural space. Here you will find Turkmen yurts, craft workshops, horse and camel rides, and regular Uzbek-Turkmen music events. Sabina Bubikirova, A News.
And that's all I've got for you today. Don't forget to check our website at anews.tv, and of course don't forget to check us out on all of the social media platforms. Back to you, Guy.
Guli, thank you very much. A packed segment tonight to end an equally packed show. Well, that does bring us to the end of Prime Time tonight. From all of us here at A News, thanks for watching.